After you finish the tutorial of Stalcraft, you're given the choices between two factions, Stalkers or Bandits. Now, you might be wondering, what is the difference? Which one is the best? And so this video is going to try to explain which one is the best one to choose, and why. So I'd say the first most obvious choice is actually to choose the one that your friends are going to play together with. So maybe if you already have friends that are playing as bandits and your friends are going to stick to bandits, then maybe you'll have the most fun playing as a bandit, and likewise the other way. So first of all, it's important to understand that at face value, the different factions doesn't really have any big differences. They're actually quite similar. They have the same progression trees, and they don't really have any core mechanics that are different. However, I do want to try to explain some main things about the factions that it is important to understand. The first one is that you can only choose between Stalkers or Bandits. However, later in the game, you do have the option of choosing between Mercenaries, Covenants, Freedom, or Duty, depending on which faction you choose to begin with. See, Bandits can become Mercenaries or Covenants, and Stalkers can become Freedom or Duty. However, the different factions, or the original factions, cannot become any of the other ones, meaning a Stalker cannot become a Mercenary or a Bandit cannot become a Duty. But once you enter a faction, you can leave it and then go back to your original faction, or you can go to the other faction. And so I'm gonna try to explain why Bandits are the best choice. The biggest initial experience you'll have playing Stalcraft is engaging with other players and doing PvP, and so one of the biggest differences between each of the factions is how the maps are laid out and how the different factions interact with each other in the map. And so I've made a map showing the south zones and how the different factions sort of interact intuitively, or maybe in a way I'd call it emergent gameplay. See, even though everybody can go anywhere they want, when you're killed by another player or die by something, you respawn at the base, and so this creates a sort of dynamic of having zones where different players sort of roam, and I'll try to show you how the routes between the different bases, where you're doing mainly your quests and traveling between your bases and maybe farming around your own base, interacts with the other base and the other faction. And so not only are the roads between the bases for bandits shorter, however they're also actually less deadly. And so when you're playing bandits, one of the biggest differences between playing a bandit and playing a stalker is that you have a bigger freedom of choosing to engage with PvP, as with maybe many times as a stalker, you're sort of forced into doing it when you're trying to progress or do quests, while the bandits can most often try to roam for their own on their side of the map, where few stalkers even dare to try to go. When you play the game, this happens intuitively, and you get a sense of how often you're dying at each place, and this shows the amount of deaths in Cordon. And as you can see, when I overlap it over the Stalcraft map and the routes of each of the factions have to take to, for example, get to the north, you'll see that bandits have a quite safe route to travel on their own that isn't a part of the death cycle between PvP players and others. And as a Stalcraft player, you'll be traveling between the bases sometimes, and losing your progress is just annoying. When you're eventually playing in the north or middle of the map around a bar, you'll also encounter the two maps for each of the factions, the one to the left called Radar, I believe, and on the right side we have what I'll call the forests. The biggest difference is that the bandits have a much easier time playing and farming inside of the pits or the radar than the stalkers have playing in the forests. Eventually, when you're playing in the north, and you might want to choose to play another of the different factions, meaning the sub-factions like Duty or Mercenary, There's not really right now an obvious choice that is the better of the sub-factions. The North is the end gameplay of the whole game, and so it is actually also being constantly changed around and is not even a finished product, I would say right now. But in general, it is good to know that if you're more of a PvP player, then maybe Duty or Mercenaries are the best for you. And if you're more of a PvE or quester or want to get more resources that way, I'd recommend playing Covenant or Freedom. However, which one of these, like Duty or Mercenaries or Covenant or Freedom, are best out of all of them is kind of hard to say right now. And this is again because they're changing around all the time, and so maybe the best one today is changing around because of how they changed the routes in the game towards the north. And so the best is actually again just choose the factions that your friends are playing, because then you can team up and have a much easier time playing PvP in the north. At last, I do want to say that there are some small changes that maybe you want to take into account, but I don't think it's such a big deal. And that is that some factions do have different quests that do give them different types of weapons. I don't have a complete list of these, but it doesn't really affect much, since you can basically make most guns anyways, and the ones you can't, you can buy in-game with in-game currency, or possibly also with real money if you'd like that. And so yeah, that's it. To sum it up, the bandits are the best basically because they have better map control or a easier routes when playing in the south and the middle game, and it's just a much easier way of playing, and I do recommend playing bandits. I also have a personal speculation that maybe choosing the faction that has the most players, meaning maybe that could actually be Stalkers in the European version, might lead to that you have more players of your own faction possibly being online in one server or instance, and this again accounting or contributing to there being less of the other, and then maybe you just have less enemy players on the map. I'm not quite sure about this. This is just a theory. I do hope that the balancing of the game tries to make this up, or they try to, I don't know, maybe even implement bots like Fortnite. I have no idea. Maybe that would be even worse, I don't know.